Today we're going to be talking about breaking down a defence. First primary focus here is to get us all confident in understanding that in order to get the most out of this, we're going to need to understand some of the foundational aspects for creating opportunities and along with that increasing the number of quality chances that we're creating in the final third. This is a mostly theory-based session with quite a few animations of scenarios and situations that we find ourselves in game to game. All I'm asking you to get the most out of this is that you take away the information from this and apply it to your normal game situations and normal practices. So first we're going to look at some prerequisites. We're going to skim through these very quickly. Prerequisites would be confidence on the ball, an ability to work with and without the ball, an understanding of good passing angles and good space. If we focus firstly on the confidence in the ball, that's not that we are saying here that once the ball's at our feet, we understand exactly what's going to happen with it. It is the confidence to take a chance and lose the ball and work out why we lost the ball in that situation and build and grow from there. We don't have to be perfect at this to begin with. It's just important that we're able to identify the situations, work out why it didn't go right the first time, and learn from there. So this is a safe learning environment where we're free to take chances, make mistakes occasionally, and build and increase our own confidence from there. Crucial one here is the ability and the willingness to work with and without the ball. So in order to create chances, we're going to need to make things happen on the field. So we're not just passing to move the ball, we're passing to move the opposition. Equally, if we don't have the soccer ball at our feet, that doesn't mean we can't influence the outcome of a shot on goal, for example. It might be all down to a subtle movement by another player somewhere on the field that just takes a defender out of position. We're going to be looking more at that. So again, just to make sure that we're applying that to our game when we're on the field and we're in the practices. Off the back of this session, there is going to be a couple of sessions that coach is going to run through with you. So just make sure that we're applying what we've learned here to the sessions that you'll be doing on the field very shortly. And finally, the understanding of passing angles and good space. You're going to hear me talk quite a lot about diagonal runs for straight passes and straight passes for diagonal balls. I'll go into a little bit more detail on that at the time, and also explaining what I mean by good space. In fact, coach, this might be a good time just to pause this session and just ask the group what their definition of good space might be. Okay, so we'll continue. Moving on to some of the things that we're going to be working on during this session. So we've talked about finding space, and to do so we're going to be discussing width and creativity. Width and creativity comes in a number of ways, which we'll break down a little bit further as the session goes on. So the two main focuses for this session are going to be finding the space and creating an imbalance through movement and mobility. The penetration is going to come as a result of these two things, and the maintaining tempo is fairly self-explanatory. If you're keeping the ball and the opposition doesn't have the ball, it's actually a lot more tiring to chase the ball around than it is to keep possession. So maintaining a high tempo, wearing down the opposition and exploiting tiredness and lapses in concentration. As a result of that, the finding the space, the width and creativity is going to have a direct effect on of course, the penetration, the direction of the directness of runs and passes, and ultimately moving the ball around, moving those players is going to create that imbalance. It's important that we take advantage of the opportunities when they arise. So just to break down, if I just go back, finding space, width is the primary focus here. So finding space, we're going to look at vertical width and horizontal width. Vertical width, in essence, is where if we look at the field from goal to goal, it's creating gaps in between the lines of play and playing in those pockets. So naturally, as a team, you're going to have a line of defenders, a line of midfielders, and a line of forwards. The more space that you can create, the more disconnect you can create between those lines, break those lines and play in between them, the better chance you have of building a substantial attack, and that is what we call playing in the pockets. And for the horizontal width, we're looking at creating gaps in between the players and then attacking the gaps. So identification of these situations and exploiting them accordingly. What you find a lot of the time is these two, the vertical width and the horizontal width, do come hand in hand. So here we have our field, basic setup. We've got the formation that you would normally be playing on the field. 3 defenders with two wingers that can cover as wing backs to create a 5 at the back in defence. But realistically, we're looking at a 3-5-2 formation. We've got the triangle in the middle, the centre midfielders always in connection with each other. And we've got those 2 wide players that are going to be up and down that line. Of course, the 2 forwards. I'm setting up here to play against a 4-4-2. So the first thing to note here is any stubborn defence, any well-organised defence will always allow you shots from distance and allow big crosses from out wide, because they have the strength and security in the numbers that they're able to repel those attacks. Generally speaking, a cross in from a wide area is, I would say, percentage success rate is fairly low. Often it's just a turnover in possession. If you put the ball into the box, the goalkeeper's up nice and early, or the defenders are just clearing that ball, and the opposition have the opportunity to build an attack. Also, just to note, against a back 4, you're going to have 2 central defenders that are occupying the forwards, and the full-backs are going to be able to close down your wide players quickly. So as soon as the ball moves out there, they've got players available, players over to close you down. Naturally, with any formation, midfielders are going to drop to track any runs from deep in the midfield, and this can lead to busy, congested central areas. And again, what we're going to be looking at here is the vertical and horizontal width. We're starting from the back. I don't really want to focus too much on playing out from defence, because I understand as a team it's something that you're quite well versed on, so we'll get on with this bit here. But again, the way we're set up, the ball out from the goalkeeper here, there's not a whole lot of options on, really. We could maybe pop a ball into the midfield and compete for the second ball, but really we're looking to get the ball out from the back. And right now, the way that we're set up, you're not going to be afforded much time on the ball, because those 2 strikers that you see, they've cut off the passing channels to the midfield, but they're also close enough to close those centre-backs down quickly if the ball was played out. So what we're going to do here is just drop off. And what we've done, if you notice now that midfield where we were, if you look at where the strikers are compared to the midfield, the drop is going to give us some width. We've got the natural horizontal width, but also that vertical space has created a bit of a disconnect between the midfielders and the strikers. So we've got our midfield 3 now in some space. So there's a couple of options out from the back, but very simply, we're just going to play a ball into the midfielder here. Now that midfielder on the ball is going to have a couple of options. Well, several options now, actually. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and of course, just taking the ball on, dribbling. So again, this is a good opportunity to pause. I want to create some debate here if possible. So there are no right or wrong answers. What the options here are all perfectly logical. So feel free to pick an option, put your hand up and say which option you would pick and why. So just to run through them again, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 is to carry the ball. I'll start us off. My vote is going to be for option 1. And purely because if you drop the ball back to option 1, right now the central midfield has received the ball on the half turn. Passing the ball back to that centre back is going to allow them full view of the soccer field. They're going to be able to pick their head up and get a pass off. They're actually facing the way that we want to play. So that will be my choice. I'm going to ask coach to pause the video right now and just discuss amongst yourselves for a little minute. Okay, so hopefully we had a mixed bag of, and this is designed to challenge. I'm not saying that any is any more preferable than another, but it's interesting just to get people's take on it. So hopefully we had a mixed review there. The actual option that we're going to go for in this instance, there's no immediate pressure on the central midfielder, so I'm going to suggest they actually carry the ball deeper into the midfield. No pressure on the runner, so we're just going to take that ball on. And we're going to move the players now slowly into a little bit more of a natural attacking stance. Okay, so again, connection between the midfield three. If we just ask the defenders to move around as well, this is our position. The defenders are quite happy. We're attacking. We've got options. We're in a strong position. The two wide players are keeping very wide, and what this is actually doing, that natural width, you notice that the wide players are almost touching the sideline there, forcing the wide players to stay wide in the final third, or up until the final third, should I say. Staying nice and wide is going to make those fullbacks a little bit wider than they'd naturally like to be. So as a back four, you're always going to want to maintain some sort of contact between your centre backs or the whole back line. By taking the ball through the middle and staying nice and wide, you're going to create a naturally uncomfortable gap between some of the players. So we'll just highlight those there. Slightly wider than they'd like to be, but that's because we forced them to do so. And what we're going to focus on quite a lot in this session is what I'm going to call the inside channels. I'm just going to highlight the inside channels here to you now. These are the areas that I want my players to be playing with some freedom in. Okay, so we can take the ball out wide. What I'm looking to do at any point here is get players into these positions in good attacking positions where they've actually lost their player perhaps, because if we can get the ball into these positions, that's where we can play our most dangerous passes from. It's a really naturally it's the half space between the opposition. Okay, as a back four, it's the half space, and it also creates really natural passing angles, balls in behind, and it's a really good view of the field, and it's also a shooting opportunity. So we're gonna refer back to these areas quite a lot, but just remember in your head these areas that I've just shown to you right now. So now we're going to look at two alternative scenarios to what we've just looked at there. We're building now into the final third. The team is set up. We've got the centre midfield on the ball, and all that's going to happen is we've got, realistically, the way the play is developing, we've got one option, and we're playing the ball out to the wide player. So passing the ball out wide, typically in this situation we're going to isolate that defender 1 versus 1. The defenders are going to shift over. They're going to compact around the immediate threat, which is the ball. Everybody's shuffled over. We can see one player there has assumed the role of the first defender. The centre back there is actually keeping an eye on that centre midfielder, and we've got the two forward players that are both marked. We've got the wide player on the other side here for ourselves. Right now they're the least threatening in this situation as far as the defensive players are looking at that. So, yeah, they're nice and set up. All that we're going to do here is run through, as I say, a couple of scenarios. First one, which is traditionally what we'd looked at the start, where we actually take on that player 1 versus 1 and put a ball into the middle. And we take that lottery that we mentioned before, where the ball into the box, really the success rate, unless the ball is perfect, unless the forwards are ahead of their defender and maybe it's a low cross and it was tapped in at the near post by the forward, if that ball is lofted in, up and over, really we're playing, it's a low percentage game. So if you just rewind to here, back to where we had the ball, if you look at the defensive line, they're all playing on the edge of their 6-yard box effectively. Because of where the ball is, from a defensive point of view, your chest is facing towards where the ball is being played in from, and you're ready to defend in a structured manner. Because of where they're lined up, if we just remind ourselves of those key zones, those inside channels that we mentioned before, we have an opportunity. And we can actually, if we just advance this now, the wide player's tucked in for ourselves, the centre midfield has advanced slightly, and the centre back has pushed on to offer us the easy out, the way to recycle possession if it all doesn't go right. So we can look here at a couple of different things. We can look at a ball back to the centre back who can recycle possession through the centre midfielder, and the wide player can push back out wide, as we can, if we just rewind one, the wide midfielder can push out wide again, and we can try and attack down the other side. Just manipulate the play, try and stretch the defence and work an opportunity, a gap in between. Again, if we just move that on, focusing on those key areas, we could pull a pass back to the edge of the box. If we pull the ball back to here, suddenly we've got space to take the shot on. We can dribble into the box and we can take a shot. The defence are going to scramble out to you, which is going to possibly free up the forwards. It's going to create a little bit of chaos within that structure. So there is one possible scenario that we could play out if we have the ball out wide. Again, I just want you to, I'm trying to make us more aware of the opportunities, because when we get ourselves into that position, we get the ball in the wide area and we get an opportunity to deliver the pass, great. This is what we're encouraged to do, but can we get our head up and can we play a little bit clever with this? Because if the defence is structured as we say, they're all in line, equal distance between the defenders, really it's a low percentage that we're going to get the perfect ball and the goal scoring opportunity. It might be that because of the position of the ball in that first instance here, there might be some space for the late arriving midfielder or the winger that's tucked into that space to fill that space. Because let's say, for example, the ball is crossed in, where that winger is right now, that might be the first place. If you watch any analysis of football or soccer match, where the ball is delivered, flicked away and cleared in this situation, you just watch and count how many times the ball lands in and around somewhere where that winger is positioned. It's a great position to take up. So again, that is just using those inside channels, getting a foot on the ball. And here we're just going to flip the field round now, so we can focus more on the final third, a little bit clearer, and actually limit the number of players. So we're playing 7 versus 7 here. Obviously, we've got the goalkeeper in for the defending side, but 7v7 in the outfield. And I just want to start really. We'll just freeze the frame here, and we've got a fairly standard defensive setup. We've kept the width from the first example, and all I want to do is pose you that same question again. Which pass would you play next and why? So, coach, if you want to pause it at this point, just get a quick review from everybody. Pick something different. Don't be afraid to pose a question, as long as you can back it up with some logic. That's what we want to see. We want to create a little bit of debate here. So again, there's no such thing as a silly answer to this. Which pass would you play and why? Okay, so moving on. Now, what is going to have to happen in this situation is the defensive team are going to have to close down the player with the ball. So the likelihood is that central midfielder there is going to come out and close the space down. We're going to just remind ourselves here of the key areas that we want to play in. Now that central midfielder dropped and then peeled away into that space. Okay, so again, we'll ask the same question again. Which pass would we play and why? Now, for me personally, at this point, there are two options. There's the wide player on the right and that central midfielder that is now playing in the pocket. You notice how by keeping the play where it is and dropping deeper to actually coming closer to drop deep, has provided a little bit of vertical width. We've still got the horizontal width from before, but now that central midfielder is playing in the pocket that we talked about before. And again, just to remind ourselves of those key areas, we're now dropping right in to that key area. If we can get a foot on the ball in this area, we're in a good position. Pep Guardiola, the Manchester City manager, talks about controlling key areas, gaining little advantages across the field. This is going to be one of those little advantages. So if we pop the ball into that space, players can move off. In this scenario here, that central midfielder isn't under direct pressure from they've broke the lines between the midfielders and the defensive line. So this defender here right in front of us has got a big problem, because they have a forward playing off their shoulder, and they also have that central midfielder in possession. They have to go to the ball, they have to press it, and they have to restrict the opportunity. So what we actually have here on the edge of the box is a 3 versus 2 situation. We've got the wide player that's pushed up. They are also a passing option in this instance, but if we want to be really direct, that central defender is going to have to break rank and close us down, which allows us, if you notice the forward player here, let's just play that pass one more time. The forward player steps off the shoulder of that player, just gives themselves a little bit of an angle to either play the ball in there or to run in behind. They're remaining onside while they do this, so if we run that through, the defender is going to press out to the ball. We can play a straight pass for the diagonal run, and we're in on goal. So we just run that back one more time. Dropping deeper, dropping short to go deep. Now we're playing in that key inside space there that we were talking about before. We're right in that key area. We can get a foot on the ball. The pressure's not right on us, so we can turn on the ball. And then again, the centre forward has dropped off the shoulder, just giving themselves a little bit of space to see the field. So now there's a couple of passes on, actually. We could play that diagonal ball in there, but we're in a 3v2 situation, so we're in a really, really commanding position. We've forced an advantage in a really, really key area. And again, as we discussed before, if you're going to make that, if you're going to make a diagonal run, you're looking at a straight pass. Okay, so the centre midfielder is just going to pop that ball in behind as soon as that pressure comes, and the diagonal run means that the player can see not only the passer, but can read the pass the whole way and time their run. The centre midfielder just needs to basically weight the pass correctly in order to play it into that space. And here we're just going to pose ourselves. So we're actually the same situation, same things happened here. So the centre midfielder has already come short to go deep, created that little bit of vertical space, and now we're going to play in that pocket. But this time the defender is a little bit more alert to it, and they're going to be right out to our touch. So they're not going to afford the turn. That centre forward has made the same movement off the ball. However, the pass isn't available because we've got our back to goal. We need to make sure that really we're playing the way we're facing, because if we turn at this point as the centre midfielder, we're going to turn into trouble. So really, without going home to the centre midfielder, which would now be a very, very dangerous pass, to go home from there back to that centre midfielder is a very, very dangerous pass, because they actually have two players. They've broke that line, so if they pass back there, that centre midfielder is going to be under a lot of pressure without much of an outlet. So really, there's only one option. So the pass is going to have to be nice and quick out to the wide player, who, as we mentioned before, is going to come under immediate pressure from the outside player, because they're afforded that there with a back four. They're always going to come under that pressure immediately. So if we run that through, again, we've got the player isolated. We can take him on 1v1, running down the line. If we just let everybody catch up, we'll just run that one right through. We're kind of, as a defensive setup, we're relatively happy at this point that we've got numbers up in the right areas, and we can probably safely repel the cross. The centre midfielder has been picked up by an opposing centre midfielder, and there aren't really a whole host of chances on for us here. So what we can do, what we need to look at here, is breaking the field down into smaller games. If you look where the ball is right now, that is a 1v1. But our centre midfielder is on the right side of their defender. So while they wouldn't be afforded a lot of time on the ball, they certainly wouldn't necessarily be afforded a shot on goal, or not an effective shot on goal anyway. They could be utilised here to create a 2v1. So we've got the player with the ball. We can perhaps utilise this player. Ultimately, the wide player is going to want to beat that defender. They're going to have to either get a yard of space to cross the ball in, or they're going to have to beat the player in order to get into the box. Now, there is a very, very simple bypass. They can either take them on, take their chances there, or they could utilise the potential 2v1 in that key inside channel that the centre midfielder has taken up, just to play a simple 1-2. So we're in behind, and suddenly we're right into the heart of that defence. Players are going to be scrambling everywhere to try and close you down. We've got late arrivals from the centre midfielder, and that's the wide player on the other side if we need to. But the centre forwards can also, a little bit of clever movement in the box, and we're creating a really, really good goal scoring opportunity. Because somebody's going to have to press that wide player, otherwise they're going to run the ball effectively right up to the goalkeeper and poke it past him. So that is one scenario that we could play out. We just rewind there for a second as we've done. Let's see what else we could do. Does anybody else have any other suggestions for a pass? So again, coach, great time to pause it. Let's just think about this in terms of what we could do as a team here again. Okay, so challenge each other. There are no right or wrong answers in this situation. So challenge each other, see what we can come up with. I'll let you do so for a minute or so now. So what we could look at doing here is actually pulling the ball back a little bit further. Okay, so we could come right out to that centre midfielder, and everybody's going to move in reaction to that. If we just rewind again for a second, the ball here, everybody is defending the kind of around in line with the penalty spot. So 12 yards from goal. is the space that we have. By pushing the ball out further, you notice the wide players are going to go wide again, and the defence actually have chance to come out. So we've drawn them out a little bit. That was a very congested area. What we've done by bringing the ball out deeper is drawn the defensive line out, so they're now defending the edge of their 18-yard box. Again, with our wide players going wide, we have created that disconnect between the back four. You notice a big gap on this side. So there's a couple of passes that we could play here. Let's just go from this again, just so we can see the movement, see what happens here. The ball drops back, wide players go wide, defensive reorganisation. The wide players staying wide creates pockets. Here's one. It's a straight ball for a diagonal run, as we've just mentioned before. Again, that keeping wide allows the wide player to see the whole field. They can see the passer, they can time their run, they can make sure they stay on side because they can see right the way down that line, and they can see where they're going to go. So giving yourself that natural angle is going to help you on the field. And secondly, interestingly, it's a really, really clever ball. You do see it more and more often these days. We could simply recycle possession here. The three centre midfielders are still in close contact with each other, which we'll discuss in just a second. But we can also play a lofted ball over the top and over those defenders. As we mentioned before, the defenders are going to be keeping their eye. They're effectively scanning the field. They're realising the danger, but they're going to have to watch the ball coming in. If they're watching a ball over the top, this right back for the red team, the defending team, is going to have to watch the ball come in, and with that happening naturally, they're going to lose the sight of that wide player. So the wide player can cut in behind. Suddenly they're in behind. We can look at that wide player cutting in, and the two forward players, perhaps even the central midfielder arriving late or holding on into that into the inside channel that we discussed. But there's a couple of passing options for us. And as I mentioned, all the while, those centre midfielders are remaining in contact with each other. It's effectively a triangle there. So there are always two passes on. If the pass isn't available, we can recycle possession and we can move out again. So there's no immediate danger to us as a team for losing the ball. Also, because we're playing our positions here and we're keeping in our positions, if there was a stray pass and we did lose the ball, we're in a good, strong position to win the ball back nice and early. And if we did lose the ball high up the pitch here, if we can win it back high up the pitch by remaining in our position and transitioning quickly from attack to defence, if we can win the ball back quickly, we might be able to play in these transitions between the attacking team. You know, if the Reds get the ball back and we can take the ball off them, they've suddenly gone from attacking, they've gone from defending, they've won the ball back, they're now attacking. So their formation would change entirely because they've got the ball. If we can win it back here, we can take advantage of poor defensive positioning, if you like. So that's why it's equally, secondarily, it's as important to play our position in this sense here. So we're not going to play either of those passes. All we're going to do is actually work the opportunity to the other side and show you exactly the same thing, mirror image. We have a ball in to that gap for the wide player, or we have that same cross-field ball. So now just to go back to our formation here and talk a little bit about fluidity of position, pairings, and the way we should be perhaps looking to move an opposition through our own positioning as well. Change things ever so slightly, just subtle changes that might just give us a competitive edge. So we've got our fairly standard formation here. We've got 3 at the back, we've got 5 across the middle, and we've got 2 forwards. From this formation, what we can see here in the attacking sense, so right now we'll just ignore the defenders because we're talking more about the final third. The defenders are going to play a key role in recycling possession, filling in gaps, filling in possession. So let's say, for example, a centre midfielder steps forward. Often what I would like to see is the centre-back step into that role, into that holding role, and just maintain the shape, maintain the position. For right now, what we're looking at here is a fairly standard centre mid forward in good contact with the 2 forward players. Fairly standard to see. Works great. It means the distribution can come right the way through from that centre midfielder, but first we have to get the ball to the centre midfielder. If we're not having much success in that final third with getting the centre midfielder on the ball, and we do want our centre midfielder to, in the attacking sense, if we want to get our centre midfielder to get a foot on the ball, what we could look at doing is inverting that triangle. Okay, with that centre midfielder that we want to distribute the play through, sitting a little bit deeper, they're going to be afforded a little bit more time on the ball. So they're going to be able to get the ball into the feet, they're going to be able to get the head up, and they're going to be able to play the pass. In doing this as well, what we actually create is a few more links further up the field. So if we can get a foot on the ball in the centre of the park, what we now have is a little bit more, a few more links to create in the final third. So we've got one triangle there, we've got another here, so we're making nice links, and we also have a 4 in effect in the middle that can string any number of passes together. So this, as an attacking sense, is key because we've got all these options. So have a look around you, familiarise yourself with the teammates that play in these positions, because you're the ones that are going to be playing these smaller games within the larger game. So if it is, for example, that we're playing the ball down the left, we've got a forward, a centre mid and a winger all within contact of each other, that's 3 players. If the defence is wise to that, they'll afford 3 players over. They might even afford an extra man to create a 4v3 in the other favour. So in the defensive favour, they're going to be numbers up. What we need to identify from that point is where their weakness is, because if they've afforded an extra player and currently we're playing numbers down in one area of the pitch, that means that they are lacking in another area of the pitch. They've got a deficiency somewhere else. They've got a player down because they've afforded one extra to go there. And what we also keep is that connection with the centre midfield 3. So that triangle is present at all times. I do want that to rotate. So know where your players are, play off each other, and move off movement as well. That's crucial. If it is that we've got 4v3 on one side of the field, maybe we can recycle the play, switch it to the other side where we know they're a player light, and we can play 3v2, possibly even 3v1 if we're quick about how we do it. But we're making sure that we're aware of these links and we're maintaining that. Moving on to the next part. We've looked at the wingers taking the ball down the outside. Taking the ball down the outside and committing defenders. If that's not having as much success for us as we could, it might be that naturally on the left wing you play a left-footed player, and on the right wing you play a right-footed player. Naturally speaking, you're going to want to keep the ball on your favoured side, which means you're going to be forced down the line and you're going to be delivering a ball into the box. If it's not having any success for you, on the manager's cue, we can perhaps switch flanks. So if the 2 wide players switch flanks, naturally now, if a left-footed player is playing on the right and a right-footed player on the left, you're going to want to cut infield instead of taking the ball down the line, because you're going to be trying to deliver across with your weaker foot. By cutting infield, you're going to be taking up that key area of the inside channel naturally, but you're going to need some movement off that run, because if you move infield, suddenly you're making the field quite compact for yourself. So you're going to need to be able to have alert players around you. Just relating back to what we were saying at the start, being able to work for each other off the ball and make those runs. It might be that you might not even get the ball at the end of it, but making that run is going to draw half a yard of space, because it's going to throw a seed of doubt into the defender's mind. Alternatively, again, we can look at other switches. Defenders are probably always going to want to remain with one forward. They've got a task to do. It might be that they are marking one specific forward, and unless you switch, then they're going to stay quite comfortable for the whole game. If it's working for you, great. If it's not, let's just switch those players around up at the top. It's just going to throw that little bit of confusion. The defenders are going to have to start talking more, and they're going to have to either follow their man or decide to stay where they're going. But if they don't communicate, they don't make that decision, we could create that imbalance that we were talking about. So it's just little tweaks like this. We're not doing anything formationally drastic, but what we're doing is just adding an extra dimension, just a little bit that could go in our favour. And also, if we're talking about playing off players, I mentioned it a little bit at the start about playing the way that you're facing. I've mentioned it midway through, playing the way you're facing. So with a small change here, what we can do is play a ball into a deeper lying striker, and he's now got 2 players, or he or she has got 2 players that are now sat facing the goal. So if that forward player, the most further forward player, can get a ball into their feet, they're going to have their back to goal. If players are making runs off that forward's position, they can either receive a ball into feet and shoot the way they're facing, or they can receive a through ball into their path and suddenly they're into the box. So very, very small adjustments to formations. We're not doing anything drastic. In theory, all we've done is drop an extra player into the midfield, if you like, but they're playing in that half space in the inside channels. The forward and the centre mid are in those channels naturally in this position. So worth thinking about. Just a little tweak for in-game if you want to make something happen. Now, just to elaborate on what I mean by wingers switching positions, so the left footer playing on the right side, the right footer playing on the left side, naturally we're going to want to come inside. So again, if we just pop the ball out to the wide player, going to be closed down quite quickly. The right-footed player in this instance would probably want to travel down the right-hand side and cross the ball in with the right foot. The left footer, that's going to be a little bit more unnatural. You might see Arjen Robben or Frank Ribery, they used to switch sides regularly because it was Arjen Robben in particular with his left foot used to like to cut inside and take a shot on at the back post. What we're going to do naturally by moving the ball infield is drag the opposition left back with us, which is going to create a compact defence in the middle and free up a big area on this outside. And if I just link that back in with the movement off movement that we were talking about and making selfless runs to free up some space, because right now there's very few opportunities on for the player on the ball, because the opposition team are quite compact in the middle. They're offering us a shot from range, but it might not be the ideal opportunity because they are standing between destination and the ball. So you might not be able to get your shot past in the first place. But there is a big pocket of open space. Two things we could do. We could take the ball on ourselves, but we're trying to cross the ball in on our weaker foot at this point. What we could look to do is have some movement off the movement, and it's our centre midfielder making a run out wide, crossing over our path and just providing that width. What that width is going to provide is a problem for the left back here. It's now a 2 versus 1 situation. If that run isn't tracked, it's an obvious 2v1 situation, and we can slide the ball down the line into the path of that player. So whenever you're in a 2 versus 1 situation as a defensive player, you have to drop. So you're going to have to drop straight so that you can be aware of both things that happen, and you can be alert and give yourself a fighting chance to make the right manoeuvre. So naturally, it's going to create that little bit of space. And what that space is going to do is just provide us with a little bit of either forward motion or an opportunity on goal. I count realistically 3 good solid opportunities here. And that would be one pass out wide to that centre midfielder on the overlap. It would provide a ball into the space for the forward players to chase, to turn around that defensive line, just popping a ball in behind, or, naturally, a direct shot on goal. So if you want to pause it here, coach, let's just have a quick discussion over which option we would take at this point. Okay, back with us. Again, no right or wrong answer at this point. It is more the focus on the fact that if the wingers have swapped sides, there's going to be an emphasis on the other players around us to join in and fill gaps and make selfless runs in order to attack the space. Because what it's going to do, if our wingers are cutting in, we're not going to have the same natural width as we would do if the wingers are forcing wide, because naturally you're going to want to cut inside on your favoured foot. Now finally, I just want to talk a little bit more about movement off movement. It is something that I've touched upon, but I just want to make sure I've covered it so that we understand exactly what I mean when I say movement off movement. So there are some simple triggers that we can look at. We've talked about the triangle between the midfield three. If a midfielder drops, if a centre midfielder drops deeper to receive the ball, then naturally speaking, the opposition midfield are gonna follow the run, which means we might be able to have a little bit of space in behind. So if I know that my midfield pairing right there, one is going to drop, the other one can push a little bit deeper. One's dropped to receive the ball, one's pushed a little bit deeper into space. that's going to create breaks in the lines of defense. So right now the defenders aren't going to move. We're just going to talk. I'm more focusing on what I'm trying to say as the attacking team. So again, if we just run that back through, simple triggers. One player drops short, the other drops deep. Simple trigger. Now off that movement, what we have in the middle of the park right there, we've got centre midfielder and 2 forwards. It's all quite bunched together. But what we have done is created a 3 versus 2 situation. The natural movement off there is to just create a little bit more of we don't want to be we want to make it more of an obvious 3v2, so we're going to feed off into the gaps around, and we're going to try and work an opportunity from there. So the simple movement is one comes short, one drops deeper, and from there, from that movement, we're looking realistically, 2 players are being marked by 1 player in that situation. The midfielder's obviously got more time on the ball if that ball was played in straight away, but what we can do is split that defender just to make it a little bit more difficult. Make the it's all about giving ourselves small advantages in different areas of the field. So we've broken the lines, we're playing in the pocket, and we've also given ourselves a numbers up situation in a really crucial area. What that's going to do, the reaction from there, realistically, in the game situation, is those the fullback on the right fullback is going to have to tuck in, which is going to free up the wide player. So it's a chain reaction. So at that point, we might reconsider our pass that we play. We could go out wide, but really, we've got a good opportunity in the centre of the park here. So what we can actually do is play the short pass that was available. That's, again, bringing that centre midfielder off that. We'll just play that one more time. Little 1-2 in the midfield here. In reality, that is going to draw the midfielders onto us. Those 3 midfielders there are going to press. One will probably drop realistically. But if they don't, if they all get sucked in, it's going to create the vertical space that we were talking about. It's going to create that disconnect between the lines, and we're going to be able to play even further in the pocket. Now, the pass I've played there wasn't necessarily the obvious pass. We could have gone to the centre midfielder, but to play the centre midfielder in, if we pass the ball to feet, they're not going to be facing their intended target. So talking about movement off movement and playing the way that we're facing, the forward player on the half turn that's dropped off into that space is actually much better able to influence things by receiving the ball in a little bit deeper. Again, what it's going to do, that centre midfielder playing in the pocket, is going to free them up to face forward. Okay, so what we're looking at doing is playing the way we're facing and supporting the way that they face. So the forward player receiving the ball on the half turn might even still have their back to goal, but what it's doing is it's giving that centre midfielder the opportunity to receive the ball into feet the way that they want to be facing, which is the goal. And they're playing inside that the channel, inside that inside channel as well, that half space that we focused on throughout the session. Going to be able to drop a ball into feet, and we're now in a position where we can exploit that 2v1 very nicely, or even the 3v2 if you like. So just to rewind again, ball into feet, play the way you're facing, support the way they face, ball in, play off the shoulder, diagonal pass for a straight run, and we've created a shot on goal. So we'll just play the scenario through in its entirety. It's all very nice and quick, it's fluid, it's all happening. That's the thing that should be happening here, okay? As soon as we get a numbers up situation, we need to be exploiting it as quickly as possible, because the longer you give the defensive team chance to reset, the more they'll be able to nullify the attack. So when you see a numbers up situation, it's all about identification, and we exploit it from there. So we've covered everything we're going to cover in the theory-based session here. So the take-home parts of this, there's going to be a couple of handouts that will be given out through the session as well that you'll get to take home with you. Just a little bit of further reading, and what we're going to do is take this to a few field sessions over the next few weeks. I want you to take as much information as you can from this and try and apply it to the field. This is what's going to be really important, is the way that we link up, the way that we create the space and the time for ourselves on the ball, but a lot of it is about getting our head up and thinking just a little bit outside of the normal that we're doing, and just with the hope of creating a few more chances on the field and just giving us that confidence that we can break teams down and we can create lots of opportunities on goal. So just to summarise the takeaways, Open bodies, and what I mean by that is give yourselves an angle to receive the ball. Don't be afraid. It's some of the sessions that we'll go through, that's going to be very exaggerated. So we're going to be on the half turn, we're going to be able to see who we're receiving from, and we're also going to be able to see who we're passing to next. It's a good idea to have that in your mind, knowing where you might go next with that pass. So receiving the ball on the half turn on a good angle is going to give yourself plenty of chance to not only receive the ball well, but be able to do something with it quite quickly as well, because you're not going to be afforded a whole lot of time as the attacking team in the final third. Good space, we touched on it at the very, very start, and just to give you exactly what I'm looking for by good space. Good space is being free, so you've got time, you've got a little bit of space around you. Free being one, second being in a passing channel where you can effectively receive the ball. Now, I'm not talking about standing behind a defender in acres of space, because you're not going to be able to be found with a direct, simple ball. You're making, as we mentioned with the triangle in the midfield, you're always moving so that you can see two options at all times. So good space is being free and in a passing channel to effectively receive the ball. Moving on, straight runs for diagonal balls and diagonal runs for straight passes. Again, it just gives you that natural angle to see where the ball is coming from, read the path, and time your run accordingly. As we just mentioned there, play the way you face and support the way that they face. And be positive with this. Be creative and don't be afraid of taking a chance. If you look at the actual success rate of passes in the final third, naturally it's going to be less than if you were just keeping the ball. If you just had a 5v2 keep away, you could string 10, 20, 30 passes in the right circumstance together. In the final third, you might find yourselves in an even numbers situation, maybe even a numbers down situation, and you have to create something from that. Key passes are riskier than standard keep ball, and it's absolutely okay to make an error. So be creative with it. This is a safe learning environment where we can make mistakes, but just make sure that we understand why. So for the next time, we can maybe adjust our path slightly, take an extra touch. Sometimes space is all about one more step or one less step. And what I mean by that is you might be able to stand still and find yourself in more space than you did 2 seconds earlier. So scan your surroundings. If you don't have the ball, can you move to space? Will space become available if you don't move? It's all about the awareness of your surroundings and also the creativity of what you're doing. The field awareness that'll come with time, but just make sure that you're applying everything that we've worked on in this into the next sessions that we're going to be going on to over the next few weeks. So thank you very much for listening, and if there's any questions, coach is going to write them all down on a piece of paper and feed them back, and we can have another session where we run through some of the questions. So thanks very much for your time, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye bye.